So after a number of revelations over the course of roughly the last year from Edward Snowden, Glenn Greenwald, finally Obama is responding to the massive amount of public opposition to what the NSA has been doing, the recommendations that his panel put forward to him, the 46 different recommendations, and now he's coming out with his reforms that will be instituted in the NSA. And from my point of view, they're a little bit weak sauce, but we're going to go over most of them and we'll give our opinion. Now, a couple of the things that Obama said, it's interesting. One of the reforms that he's going to do that he was most strongly in favor of is what he got a lot of, not opposition from American citizens, but from other powerful political figures.
I know, the big change he's making.
So not really surprising.
Yeah, one of the big changes he's making is something that I don't even care about.
Yeah, I don't really care about it either.
Yeah.
So he says, the leaders of our close friends and allies deserve to know that if I want to learn what they think about an issue, I will pick up the phone and call them rather than turning to surveillance.
That's such a political line. Like, it's a nice line, but it's not like, if I want to know what they're thinking about something, I'll look them in the eye and call them on the phone.
Yeah, Bush would have said that.
Right, we'll Skype.
Yeah. So what he's referring to there is the investigating the leaders of foreign governments, particularly allies of the United States, which I think you and I would say, yeah, of course they're doing that. But they were surprised to find that out in other countries. And I don't know if I believe him, but reports are coming out, I think the New York Times was talking about this, that Obama was surprised to find out that Merkel was actually being spied on.
Yeah, and of course the Brazilian
she was
president
not happy about that.
Canceled a visit. Of course they'd be unhappy about it. They don't want that for the same reasons that same reason nobody wants it to be on. But that strikes me as spy work, and I have no problem believing that the NSA, that the president didn't know that.
I suppose that could be true. Now, again, we're going to get to the reforms in just a second, but just to give you an idea of sort of Obama's driving philosophy going into this, here's one thing that he said. Intelligence agencies cannot function without secrecy, which makes their work less subject to public debate. Yet there is an inevitable bias not only within the intelligence community, but among all who are responsible for national security to collect more information about the world, not less. So in the absence of institutional requirements for regular debate and oversight that is public as well as private, the danger of government overreach becomes more acute. And there he's saying that at some point you can overreach, but he's also, even in when these are the reforms we're going to make, he's defending in a very fundamental way the fact that, this needs to be secretive.
Yeah, but I mean, that's my favorite sentence of all the things that he said, because it does get to me the core concept, which is that these guys always will want to do more. Always.
Yeah, of course.
If they're capable of it, they want to keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it.
And by these guys, he's one of these guys as well.
Yeah, he's one of these guys. He's not really in the intelligence community. I mean, as the guy who technically is in charge of everything and in charge of the CIA, in charge of the military, I guess he is. But, he's going to go and they'll still be there. The NSA staff, or they're going to be there in 2017. So it does, what he's doing now sets some precedent. What he's doing now is also not binding and could simply be
changed under a new
undone by a new president. But it's also true. So rather than read into whether you think it was a shitty quote and I think it was an okay quote, it doesn't really matter. What we can both agree on is it is true. Those guys will always want to push it, and it's probably not a good idea that they're unchecked. And it does acknowledge that. But also, it is true that by the very nature of spy work is that we can't debate all of it.
Yeah.
Right? We get that some of it you absolutely can't say. It's just that some of us think it's something that you could talk about.
Yeah, particularly because it seems to be, for the most part, targeted at Americans in a way that we would not have expected. It's one thing to investigate.
Targeting Americans, I don't care about. It's the possibility that it's everything. Is like, of course we're going to target Americans. And of course we already have laws where you can get the warrant after the fact. What does it take? It's 72 hours to get a warrant? If something comes up to them and they think that the John Iadarola is involved in some sort of attack, well, yeah, I expect them to be listening to you, and I expect them to be listening to you right away.
Yeah, but you might expect them to be listening to me after there's some evidence that I am involved in something. They
got to hear first.
Yeah.
They got to hear that something's got to lead them to it. Yes, agreed.
So let's talk about some of these reforms. A lot of information is going to be coming out over the next few days and weeks about not just these reforms, but the actual way that they'll be implemented. But here are some of them. First, as we alluded to, Obama says that they will not eavesdrop on the heads of state or governments of close U.S. friends and allies. That's nice of them. They are our allies after all.
You find out that you were eavesdropped on, then you're like, that's a pretty clear indication that, hey, Bolivia, not a close friend.
Yeah, not that close. Yeah. They will establish an outside panel of privacy advocates for the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court.
That's a really key element.
Yes.
We need to know what that means.
We don't know what it means.
Like, does it just mean guys who are advocating on the outside?
Yeah.
Like, come on,
yeah.
protect us more, or
Yeah.
are they in there as their decision making? Are they involved in the arguments?
Yeah, those privacy advocates, how close to that intelligence community will they be? We don't know that yet. Let's see, I think most people are going to be most interested in this one. A collection of bulk telephone metadata will be ended in its current form. But don't get too excited about that, because when they say its current form, the changes that will actually be implemented are not that strong. It does not mean in any sense that they're going to stop collecting the data. It's just that it's more than likely a company that will be collecting it and holding it rather than the government.
I like the idea that at the bare minimum, if it's held by another company, that then again you'd have to, I think it's such a simple solution. Evidently, they don't. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, hold it in a private company, and then if you specifically want to look at someone's, you get a warrant.
Yeah.
Like, right?
Yeah, but again, the distinction between it being held by a private company and the government, I think to many people, I don't have a fundamentally stronger sense of trust in the private company than in the government.
I don't, but I don't want the people who collect it to hold it and be able to look at it whenever they want. Like, I like the idea that someone else is holding it for them, and
it's some sort of buffer.
Even if that person has hopefully has no vested interest. This is their job. They're just a giant data collection service, and you hold it, and then we'll obviously get some cases where there's some total screwballs who work for that company, right? Who'll be
definitely
looking at. But that said, again, the issue is then when you have evidence of something, how does the government act to get a hold of the data being held by the third company? Right? Won't that then be the crux of this issue?
Yeah.
And if they just call them and go,
gimme,
then
no,
then it makes no difference.
There will be judicial review, although again, who knows what that means. I mean, we've talked before about how rare it was, especially under Bush, that they would go to the FISA court to get these warrants, which seems ridiculous when you bear in mind that when they go, they always get the warrant.
Yeah, we were wrong.
And so judicial review here, what does that really mean?
Our outrage that I just remember, because when Jack and I were doing the show about the FISA court, when the Times broke the FISA court story in the Bush administration, how could these guys just so flagrantly break the law in a way that I can't even find a case that, to me, that Obama has done that dramatically and that clearly. But then you'd look into it and it'd be like they've looked at 1,863 warrants and they gave 1,862 of them. And you're like, yeah, you're right. Why do we care whether they go to this made-up court anyway? So the FISA court has to have teeth. It's got to at least be as no greater than the rubber stamp given to cops when they fill out a warrant. But they got to put stuff in a warrant. They got to make some case before a judge signs off on it. And of course, sometimes judges don't.
Yeah, perhaps the privacy advocate will be important in that process. Finally, companies will be more free to discuss government information requests. So when a telecommunications company is asked by the government to provide all of the information they have about the sorts of calls you've been making, the metadata, those sorts of things, now, previously they had been barred in many ways from revealing to the public that the government was looking for that information. Now they will be more free to reveal that, which I think is again, a good step.
Yes.
It's still up to the company to make that decision, but I think that some will choose to.
And what's more free?
Yeah, it's more free.
Yeah, right. It's more free. Free? Or is more free just slightly less restricted? Mm-hmm. Like, hey, the government made a request today. Can't tell you what it was.
Yeah. We've had so many different revelations about what the NSA and other government agencies have been doing to violate the privacy right, or at least from my point of view, the privacy rights of Americans. I think it's pretty clear in many cases. And it's all been leading up to the government actually acting in some fashion. And I'm worried that there was so little attention, I think, being paid by the population to what was going to happen before Obama comes out with reforms. I think it'll be all too easy for the population to see this and say, well, look, something's being done. And then that'll be case closed. But will anything be done? All of these, even if strong versions of these reforms are put in place, I don't know that they actually matter, let alone if they're just weak versions of it.
Look, I think that the value in what Edward Snowden did is that we know. I don't think we can stop it. I don't. And maybe there'll be a big movement too, and maybe there'll be a different kind of leadership, but I don't see a race between Chris Christie and Hillary Clinton being about restoring privacy rights.
Yeah.
I don't see that happening anytime soon.
When a new president comes in, they sit him down and they explain the way things are. But does it necessarily stop at, and thus you need to help protect Americans? Do you think that there's no chance that some sort of implicit or explicit threat is used to help make sure that that's the case? Because it seems so rare that any major reforms are made, particularly when it comes to national security.
Well, first of all, much of this stuff is happening now, and the changes in the manner in which we can has changed since Obama got into office, let alone since when Bush got into office.
Yeah.
Our ability to gather and sort since 2001 has changed dramatically. No, I don't think there's an implicit threat. I think it's fairly instinctive. I think, though, the very reason, the thing that I brought up is why we can't count on the people in charge to do it, because they will always have that threat and that knowledge that there's the threat that they didn't do enough. I mean, that's what the threat is. Do you want to be the president who didn't do enough? You know.
Yeah.
So all the more reason why we have to sort of codify in law a vigorous public advocate in the FISA court, within the FISA court. You know, and maybe a FISA judge, you know, maybe they're appointed for every 4 years, and that they sit and listen to the arguments from both sides. You know, and we're not talking about, you know, Glenn Greenwald is not going to be the public advocate. Like, I get that it might be someone who, you know, he'd be good at it, I suspect, but that, you know, but it'll be someone who thinks that privacy rights need to be defended, but that if persuaded, thinks, oh, that sounds like a pretty credible threat. Go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead with that.
Yeah. Although, again, the threat is that that person is put under the same sort of persuasion that the president is in your example.
Right, but they're at least inoculated from it a little bit because they're making an argument to somebody else who can overrule them.
Yeah.
But they have to make the argument. Somebody's got to be making the argument. We're going to lose most of the cases. The government's going to get most of the warrants they want. They just can't go unchecked. It's a terrible. It's not just a bad precedent. It's bad in practice.
Yeah.
They'll abuse it even if they don't mean to, even if it's fairly good people who end up abusing it, let alone bad people.